On the left side, it's a listing of the major nutrients that's required to be listed on the feed tag. Now they're generally required as being nutrients important to determine the suitability of the feed for its intended use, but they're also nutrients that are generally easy to test and monitor for compliance. The list of nutrients, it's not at all the entire nutrient composition of the feed, meaning that every feed contains nutrients that aren't exactly listed on the bag or on the tags, either way. There are many nutrients that are supplied by feeds that aren't listed on the tag, and some are added to the formulas differently, such as the vitamin and mineral package or other nutrients that are naturally maybe through the ingredients that are used in formulation. And we'll talk about that a little bit later too. For example, oats, I guess, they supply a range of nutrients included in the guaranteed analysis, such as protein, fat, a small amount of calcium, some phosphorus, and on and on. But oats also contain nutrients not required to be listed on the tag, different minerals such as chromium, manganese, and other B vitamins. They also have biotin. They naturally have biotin in them. You know, we get asked several times why it is that we don't have biotin in our feed or put it in there, because there are some other feed companies out there that do list biotin. The reason that we don't add it in there is because it is an expensive product to put in the feed. And so what we tell people, if you think that you have horses that need biotin, just add that to your ration, because if we put it in there, not all horses need it. And there are a lot of people that don't want to pay what biotin costs to be in or added into the feed at a therapeutic dose. Because we could say that we have biotin in our feed because oats has biotin in it. So I guess we could actually list that if we wanted to, but we don't, because we don't have it in there as a therapeutic dosage. So that's just kind of a little bit of my soapbox there for biotin, because the people that do say that they have biotin in there, if that feed doesn't cost probably $40 a bag, then there's not enough biotin in there to be considered a therapeutic dose and be doing anything with it. Same as in, I guess, for other ingredients as well. So all ingredients are essentially just delivery vehicles is what they are for nutrients, and the nutrients not supplied by the blend of ingredients needed to be added to the formulas. So that's a little bit kind of on the tag. We'll talk a little bit, I guess, going down there with some of the other products. Here's some more. The list of ingredients, they're supposed to be listed on the tag in descending order by weight, meaning the ingredient that's listed first should be in the greatest quantity in that bag of feed. That may not always be the case, because there's really no reliable test to see if the regulation is truly being followed. And there are times that we've seen some tags that don't comply with this requirement. We at Purina do try to do that, and we do try to follow that just because of our credibility, and that we want to remain and be at the top of the feed companies out there. So whether they're compliant or not, you know, the ingredient list isn't the formula. It's just a listing of what ingredients are in the feed that are actually in that bag that you're looking at. The list can either be individual terms like oats or corn, or collective terms such as they'll use the quotations and have like grain products that are in there. It also varies on there by state. Some states require individual terms on all the feed tags, and others they don't. So regardless of whether they are individual or collective terms in the ingredient list, the quality and effectiveness of the feed, it's not determined by the way the ingredients are listed, but the quality of ingredients that is actually used and put into the feed. Next on the tag over here on the side is the directions for use, which may be on the tag or on the bag. It can be listed either place. but it should show the amount of feed that the manufacturer says is needed to support the horses for which it's intended for. So most of the recommendations that are on there, either on the tag or on the bag, they come with a little bit of wiggle room because they're based on the average horse eating an average amount of hay. And so some people feed more hay, some people feed a little bit less. So it all just kind of determines a little bit about on your forage, on your roughage, and how much of the grain that you're going to feed as well too. So I think we've covered the quantity, weight, the name, and manufacturer. So we'll cruise over here to the next. So the next thing that we look at on the feed tags too is the feed that you're looking at designed for the horse that you're feeding. So on these two pictures, do you think that this would turn out very well for feeding these two horses if you were feeding a racehorse and rich, which is only designed to be fed at 1 pound a day to meet their nutrient requirement? And if that little pony was eating race ready, he would blow up and probably be insulin resistant after just a little bit. So actually, the racehorse needs to be eating the race ready, and the little pony needs to be eating the Enrich Plus so that he doesn't get too fat or become insulin resistant. So it all has to do a lot with starch and sugar levels as well too. And then the other thing we talk about is feeding by weight or by the volume as well, and making sure that you're feeding it correctly and in the right amounts that you need to. So this is just another illustration that you can weigh it and on feeding about the weight and not by volume. So what a feed tag doesn't tell you, that additional nutrients needed by the horse that aren't required to be guaranteed on the tag, nutrients naturally occurring in the feed but not listed in the guaranteed analysis or ingredient listing, and naturally occurring ingredients versus added nutrients. And we talked about that just a little bit ago, like for instance with biotin. A requirement established for horses, it's not yet established how much should be in there. Minimum daily requirement versus recommended optimal levels. Most of our feeds are designed to be fed at 4 pound feeding rates. And at 4 pounds, it'll meet the NRC requirements for vitamin and mineral package for horses, with the exception of what we call our ration balancer, which was what we were showing on for that little pony earlier. That's to be fed at a 1 pound feeding rate. So some essential nutrients, there are a lot of them that are in there that ranks and comes into the feed as well. And so these are just a list of, I think there's 43, it looks like here, that are on there as well too. So that's just a little bit of, and talks a little bit about the essential nutrients. So we'll keep going and cruise on. So you can see that there are things that go into making feed that may not be reflected on the label or exactly on the tag. The label or the tag, it can't describe the quality of the ingredients that are out there either. I would hope that everybody would agree that all hay isn't the same quality, especially horse people that are feeding. Some like to look at alfalfa, some want to look at Timothy, some want to go and feed just Bermuda grass. But just like with Timothy hay, there's some that's very mature with seed heads that doesn't work quite as well for horses. There's horse hay, and then there's also cattle hay. They can be the same variety of hay, even cut in the same field at a different time, and be very, very different quality hay. Same is exactly true with the ingredients. That is in all of our horse feeds as well too. All oats don't provide the same amount of protein, and all rice bran doesn't have the same amount of fat. So just by looking at them, you can't always tell unless they are or have been tested. So their color and the quality doesn't always match exactly. There can be some that are bright white, really nice looking oats that may not test quite as high of quality protein as maybe some that are a little bit darker that may have a higher quality protein. So it's just something, it's hard to tell unless you're able to test the feed and test the quality. So Christi, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. This was about reading feed tags, and then also about constant nutrition formula, which is what we do, versus maybe fixed feed formulas, because there are a lot of companies out there that do tout and talk about their formulas are fixed, so the product in the bag never changes or never looks any different. Well, that can be good in the sense or the fact that the feed all looks exactly the same, but that doesn't mean it's going to feed exactly the same all the time. And so that's kind of what we run into, and maybe a little bit of the problems. And that's why we like to do constant nutrition formula, is because we test every load of oats and we test every load of corn that comes in, so that we know what the protein level is. And so some of our products will vary a little bit in the amount of oats versus the amount maybe of rice bran or something else that's in the product, just because we know what everything tests when they come in. And so we know every single bag will test. If it's labeled to be at a 14% protein, then it's going to be 14. It's not going to have some bags that fall to a 12 or some that may fall to a 15, because if you knew that, you would be able to feed a little bit, or you would feed a little bit more if you needed to, or could be able to feed a little bit less. And so with ours, it's constant nutrition formula. So we test all the products before they come in. And then we are able to wiggle a little bit within that ration. Now, that's not saying that you open one bag of feed one time and you see that it has 20% oats in it, and the next time you open it, it's going to have 70%. That's not the case. It falls within reason, and we can use a few other products to make sure that the protein level is where it needs to be if we need to. So you can see that there are different things that go into making the feed. And like we talked about earlier, not everything is reflected on the label or on the tag. And the label and the tag, it can't exactly describe the quality or the quantity, I guess, of the oats that are in there, or the rice bran. But that's just something I wanted to be able to talk about just a little bit, so that you guys could see that that's why we don't do a fixed formula. We do constant nutrition. That way, every time you open a bag, it's the same fat level, the same protein level, and the same fiber level. So here is just going to be a little bit of an illustration of what the feed tag doesn't tell you. So here's two different products, a Primo and a Deluxe is what they're called here. And so when looking at it, the Primo horse feed that's up there is $18 a bag. It's a 12% protein, and it's a 5% fat and a 20% fiber. The Deluxe horse feed is $15.30 a bag. It's exactly the same. It looks completely the same if you look at the tag there. But what you don't know and don't see that's not listed on there, if you'll look, let me see if I can pull up a laser pointer, is right here with the digestible energy, or what we call the calories per pound. So when we feed horses, we look at calorie level, just like going in, that like us as humans look at our calorie level per day. So the Primo horse feed is, yes, more expensive, but it also runs almost 200 more calories per pound too, a little over. So when looking at that, and when you start figuring it up, yes, it may be a little bit more expensive, but if you look at the amount that you're having to feed, the Primo is probably cheaper to feed than the Deluxe feed is. So going by the price of the bag isn't always just the best way to do it, because there are a lot of times that you can feed a more expensive feed but still stay cheaper than your cost per head per day, because you're feeding less of it. We'll click, see what happens. So here's a little bit more on what the feed tag doesn't tell you. The quality control at Purina, we have several different measures that are in there that we look at and go by to be able to formulate and to look at the horse feed. So we do look at the aflatoxin level on the corn to make sure that there's not too much mold. When the product comes in, we have different things in place. We have a magnet that goes on that will pick up a penny if something magnetic happens to be in the bag, and it will kick the feed off to the side and won't let it run and be stacked on the pallet to go out to be sold. And so there, we do have different quality and safety measures that are in place to be able to check the feed. Now, with that being said, it is a factory and there is always going to be human error at some point. And so what we can say and what we like to rely on is that at Purina there, and where we do make horse feeds, we don't put anything in those plants that are going to harm a horse if something does cross over and get into the horse feed by accident. And so we don't let any products such as rumensin or anything that's going to hurt a horse in a small amount come into a horse feed plant that makes horse feed. They stay at other factories there. So that's something that I'm pretty proud of, to be able to work at Purina, because I know that there aren't any other companies that are able to do that as well. So also what the feed tag doesn't tell you is all the research that we've done behind the feed. This is some pictures of our research farm. Doesn't tell you about the statistics or the species that are there and what everything that we have done there at the farm. So we take great pride in the research farm that we have there, because we know that there's no other feed company out there that is able to do what we do and to be able to formulate and test a product. And you know, the great thing about all of our products that we test is we don't test them against other products. We test them against our own. So if we come out with a new product, for the most part, we've ran that against something that we've already made or that has been out there that we're trying to make better, or to work on a specific type of performance horse or foals, or something that needs to maybe have a lower starch and lower sugar level. It can't tell you on the feed tag, it can't tell you what's inside the bag maybe, or the scientific or the research that's been behind it as well either. So what the feed bag can do though is show you what the ultimate test is. So this is just a horse that's a 2-year-old. And so by feeding the product, the great thing that we talk about and we like to be able to show and do is we like to do feeding trials with people. And we like to go up against other products and be able to show them the difference that we can make in feeding a Purina product versus something that they maybe have been feeding. And for the most part, usually we can do it with feeding less amount of feed per day as well. So here's another just shot of another, and this is a 20-year-old gelding that was on Purina feed, just about 56 days, and you can tell the body condition score and how they've changed. So I think I've probably ran over time, as I usually do, and what we like to say is this is how Purina stays current. This is our research team, and this is what we use at the farm there. We do have our own herd of horses, and we do have a few thoroughbreds as well too. They're not just all quarter horses that we do research on. And so we like to say we have our own research team. We aren't and don't have just PhDs that sit behind a computer and formulate feeds. All of our PhDs are actually horse people and are out in the horse industry and ride and show as well too. And so we're pretty proud of that. And the last little slide we always like to show is what the feed tag doesn't tell you is how important is trust. So we hope that you can trust Purina as a company, and we hope that you can put your trust in us and know that all the research that we do and all the formulations that we do on the product, it goes into play. And we hope that you can see and you can tell it in your horses and how they perform, how they act, and most importantly, how they look too. So I think that is it, Christi. I probably went over time. from what you wanted me to go, because I think you wanted to keep it at 20
not at
minutes.
all. So
I always do.
Not a problem at all. I mean, great information is always hard to condense down, so we appreciate that. So folks, what I'm going to do is, Ty, we appreciate, I've got a few questions that's come in some text messages, so kind of want to start off with that if you don't mind. And with that being said, one of those is, how can I tell when I look at that feed tag, what would make my horse, quote, hot? You know, we think about hot-headed horses. Could you kind of discuss a little bit about that?
Yes. So when we look at that, most of the time we look at in making one hot or hyperactive, we look at the starch and sugar levels that are in there. And so a lot of that comes from your corn and your oats when you start looking at starches and sugar. So for the most part, and it's not always true, but a lot of times a pelleted product is a little bit lower in starch and sugar. But we have different feeds that we have that are out there that are low starch and sugar. Our newest one that came out that I like to recommend quite a bit is their Impact Professional Performance. So, but the starch and sugar level is what makes one hot. Now, with that being said, also, sometimes a horse that comes off of just a regular meal mix feed from around that may not have a vitamin and mineral package, and you put them even on something that's pelleted like Strategy or the Impact Professional that we're talking about, for the first 30 to 60 days, sometimes you can see them get a little bit hot or just a little bit of a change in temperament just because they're not used to getting a vitamin and mineral package. So they're just not used to being able to feel as good as they can. But for the most part, they will level off in 30 to 60 days, and then they will be fine. If not, you're probably just feeding a product that is too high in starch and sugar, or it may just be how they're managed, or maybe what you're doing with them that's causing them to be hot. Because you're never going to be able to make, per se, like a barrel horse act like a pleasure horse or vice versa. But starch and sugar level is mainly what we look at on that.
Okay. So we got, I think Tammie's on here. Tammie, can you hear us live? Yes. Can you hear us there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So
can you hear me?
You got a live person there right there with you at the BBR tonight, don't you?
Yes. Perfect. I am at the BBR in Oklahoma City, and I do have a live question. This is Tracy, and she would like to talk to Todd for just a second.
Okay.
All right.
I feed Impact Performance, and I have a passion strategy. I feed the Outlast while I'm saddling. I give them a cup of that while I'm saddling. Is it necessary to continue to do the Outlast with my Impact?
Did you ask if it was safe to do that?
Yeah, should I continue to do that with my saddling and then to go ahead and feed the Impact also? Or should I include it with my Impact at feed?
So if you're feeding the Impact Professional Performance, it has Outlast in that product. But what you need to think about is the feed or the Outlast is only going to stay in their stomachs for about 4 hours. So if you fed the Impact Performance in the morning, like at 8 o'clock, and you're not running until 1 or 2 o'clock, then that has already passed through their stomach and going to be doing no good. So you can feed the supplement Outlast to be able to add that buffering and to be able to have that Outlast in their stomach 15 minutes or so before you start riding. So it is a good idea to be able to do that, to feed them before you start riding them too, especially if it's in an odd time of the day to where the Outlast or the feed is already passed through their stomach.
Ty, can you distinguish? Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Ty, can you distinguish between the regular strategy and the Impact Performance, the professional? What is the difference in the two feeds?
So the impact, professional performance, and the strategy, the difference between those two is the impact professional performance is going to have a little bit lower starch and sugar level, but it's also going to have a higher fat level as well too, is what it's going to do. So it feeds a little bit different. Calorie-wise, they're fairly close to the same, but fat-wise, you'll see a little bit different hair coat, and horses will act just a little bit different on the professionals. They may be a lot of people have talked about them being a little bit calmer on that than they are on the strategy. But strategy is a great feed too. That we feed a lot of colts and horses as well.
Thank you.
So there's just in the impact professional performance, there's just the main thing is that there's no corn or corn byproducts in that, so the starch and sugar level is quite a bit lower.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you.
Great questions, ladies. So Ty, I had another one that came across on a text message here is when we think about some of our 14% feeds that we see, out there within the stores, are all 14% feeds the same? Or when we go and we sit and we look at that feed tag, how do we know how to differentiate on those 14%?
No is the answer to that. Not all 14% feeds are the same. So what I like to tell people all the time too is for horses, feed one that is designed specifically for a horse. Because if it is listed on there and if it is something that may be a 14% protein, but it's also got a picture of a sheep or a goat or something else on there too, then if it's safe for them, then there are obviously not enough vitamin and minerals in there to supply to a horse. And protein levels, you can get to different protein levels different ways. And there are proteins that are good for horses, and then there are different proteins that are good for a ruminant or for cattle. And so how they digest them and utilize them are completely different. So I tell people, a lot that if you're feeding a 14% protein that is $9 or $10 a bag, then you're probably not feeding a 14% protein that is adequate for a horse, because they're not all the same.
Right. And I think, Ty, you and I talked a little bit about that last night, or today, actually, the conversation that I had last night on visiting with a horse lady over the phone is kind of breaking down that cost and looking at that 14% that did not contain those vitamins and minerals. So huge opportunity. So with that being said, folks, on September the 13th, Ty will be back on to discuss with us about how do we evaluate that cost per head per day and kind of breaking that down, that type of information. So, Ty, the last question that came across in a text message to me that came from one of our customers, Trevor, is when we think about, you talk about the constant formulation and we talked a little bit about fixed formulation. Do you prefer a fixed formulation over a constant formulation, and why?
I do not. I prefer the constant formulation over fixed, just for the simple reason that we talked about earlier. Every load of oats that comes in will test and look differently. And sometimes just by looking at the product, we can back up. I think I'm still on, but I've switched over. So a load of oats that comes in, they could test at 11% protein, or they may test at 15% protein. And with a fixed formula and the exact same amount of oats added into, we're just using oats as kind of something to talk about right now, but if you use the exact same amount every time but they test low, then your protein level is lower in that bag. Where if you use a constant nutrition formula where we test every load of oats that comes in, we know that every load tests at that 14% or whatever that tag is supposed to hit at. So me personally, I would prefer to have the constant nutrition formula and know that every bag tastes or tests exactly the same in a protein and a fat level, and not that every bag of feed looks exactly the same and may test lower or higher depending on, because then you need to know if you need to feed more or less of that product at the time.
Perfect. Thank you. So Tammie has another question that came across there live at the DVR tonight. So Tammie, what's your question?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am,
Yes.
We sure can.
Okay. Yeah, I had a customer that had a question, but she did not want to be on video. And her question was that she feeds Outlast, and she's very interested in the Outlast treats. Can you give her some comparisons with the treats and the regular Outlast pellets and how she needs to use those?
So the Outlast treats, how they are used, I guess, if you want to use the Outlast treat solely for the purpose of getting the Outlast in them, it takes 5 to 6 of those treats to get a dosage in there. So I think that they can be just used as because most people just want to use 1 or 2 treats. So I would prefer to use the Outlast supplement before you saddle or before you get ready to trailer or haul, and then just use the treat later on if you need to afterwards.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So folks, I'm going to kind of walk you guys through, for those of you that have joined us tonight and those of you watching us on Facebook Live, is how do we go about getting the $10 off coupon that we can bring into any of your Farmers Cooperative locations. If you pull out your cell phone and text 95323, and in the body of that text message, type Purina, you will receive a hyperlink like what is displayed on the screen here. And you will then click on that hyperlink, and then it'll pop you into a window where you'll need to enter in a little bit of information, which is just an email contact, and then it'll forward you on in, which you would need to select the letter of the state, which, since we are Farmers Cooperative locations are in the Arkansas area, we would select A, then select Arkansas, and then for tonight, we are Farmers Cooperative Checkerboard Day Equine. Then this coupon registration is accessible for 2 days, i.e. 24 hours, which will end on August the 15th. You will receive a email which will then give you the opportunity to download that. And as shown on the screen here, it'll say save $10. It'll give you an expiration date. And then that way you can bring that into any of your Farmers Cooperative locations across western Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. So we appreciate you guys joining our online event. We know that your health is as important as everybody else's health, and with the COVID issues that are being faced right now and some restrictions that are placed upon us, we have decided to take most of our face-to-face events to a virtual platform. We will be talking throughout the next number of months about various topics, some of those being on cattle. There's going to be equine platform, and then we've got some aquaculture and wildlife platforms as well. Our next event, which would be on cattle, which is August the 18th, and then we've got aquaculture, which is going to be on the 27th of August. And then Ty will be back on our platform, I think it is September the 13th. And a couple of things, if you go and check us out on the Farmers Co-op website, on that website lists every one of the meetings that we have coming up. If you register via the website and watch our meeting via our Zoom, you get your name thrown in for a chance to win one of two $25 Farmers Co-op gift cards. This will also stream onto all of our site, or our meetings, are streaming on to the Farmers Co-op main website or Facebook page. I apologize. So as Tammie, I know you've had a little bit of experience in regards to, Ty mentioned earlier on in our presentation tonight about our equine trials that we offer. Would you like to give a little shout out of what you've seen with your customers and utilizing these equine feed demos?
The feed demos that we have done for the last year, those customers are still with us, and they're still ordering several tons of feed a week. They're very happy with their Purina products. Ty came out, Christi came out. We did some farm gate calls, looked at the horses, did some body scoring, and Ty more or less said what the horses would do best on. And they gained weight, they gained muscle, the top line come through. It was wonderful. We took pictures within like 3 months difference, and they are still with us with that feed today. So they have been very effective.
So Tammie, with adding on that a little bit, so they stop in and saw you there, Ozark, and visited with you and potentially Scott and your crew there at Ozark. Was it a pretty simple process to get started on these equine demos?
It was so easy. I mean, they just made a phone call, and all I had to do was basically call you, Christi, and you kind of took care of everything for me.
Perfect. That's what we're here for, folks, is I know changing an equine feed can be a little bit overwhelming at first, and that's what we're here for. So, guys, don't hesitate to stop in. There's 15 retail stores across eastern Oklahoma and western Arkansas. Those are listed here on the page. We've got anything, from horses. We've got some cattle opportunities, backyard flock, some show feed opportunities. So stop into any of your Farmers Co-op locations and visit with them. They know how to get a hold of me, and they know how to get a hold of Ty. We're here to support them. It's a partnership that we have. And what I'd like to do is I would like to call for last round of questions. And with that, Tammie, I'm going to check on that, but I do want to let you kind of end with some closing remarks, if you don't mind, for us, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. First of all, Christi, thank you, and thank Ty for having Farmers Co-op be part of this. I would also like to thank Miss Macy here, who is at the Purina booth. We are live in Oklahoma City at the BBR World Barrel Racing Finals. She will be here this Sunday. Please come stop and chat with her, talk with her, look at the product. She will tell you how Purina can fuel your equine machine. And our co-op, Farmers Co-op, River Valley Regional Manager, Scott Childers, is here. And if you can't get an answer from one of us at the co-op, we will call you or Ty, and we will get your questions answered.
Well, Scott, Tammie, we appreciate you, and especially Miss Macy for joining on tonight and being live there at the BBR. I know that you guys got a lot of things going on, a lot of people around you there, but we really do appreciate you guys even, being able to catch some customers or some potential customers that walk by the booth and that had some great questions for us tonight. So, folks, I've kind of checked every bit of our platform tonight, and I don't see any more additional questions. And, of course, as I said, we are sales folks that do like to talk a little bit. We can run over that 20 to 30-minute time frame. But we did have some good content and some great questions. I'm going to end with, don't forget that if you would like to receive your $10 off coupon, text Purina to 95323. And with that, Tammie, we hope that you do great. You're up running. What day of the week are you running this week?
I will run around 5 o'clock tomorrow and around 10:30 on Saturday, and hopefully make that short go on Sunday.
Perfect. Well, you guys take care of yourself, and we appreciate you guys for joining us live there at the BDR. Ty, we appreciate you taking time away from the family this evening to join us.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Catch you on our next virtual.